of Ash and Flo. This is Unbillable Hours, a podcast about professional services marketing. Stick around to listen to our insights, tips, and best practices to improve your firm's marketing and even your career.
Ash, welcome back. Everybody else as well. Welcome back to this new episode of Unbillable Hours, where, Ash, we thought...
we did.
We did. Or actually, to be more precise, you did think of this. Let's discuss how people can change course or pivot their marketing strategy, right?
Yeah, I mean, we're right now in the middle of the year, and not only in the middle of the year, the interesting thing when you look at the market is there's recession, inflation, stagflation, and consulting firms or professional services are essentially just going on purchasing companies, growing their services, pivoting, and all of this stuff. You're seeing a lot of change happening.
Yeah.
But as change is happening on the business side of things, does marketing stay the same? Are you basically going to execute a marketing strategy that you set up at the start of the year? No, not entirely. You have to adjust. And we thought, you know what, this is the time to look at how do you pivot? What do you keep? What should you do in this midpoint?
Yeah.
Right?
So to be very clear for people, right? If you feel like you're in a place where your marketing strategy is still sound and you're going to execute throughout the year, rest of the year, right? Cool. You're hit the subscribe button, drop for now. You can come back later for the next episode. If, however, you are in a situation where you feel like, oh yeah, we need to change some things, maybe that is the episode for you, right?
Also things like, hey, suddenly my boss decided he or she is buying this company.
Oh, yeah.
And suddenly, oh God, we now have a new thing. Or there are areas like, Flo, as I was discussing earlier, you have a services company suddenly trying to push a product, or you have a products company trying to push a service. What does all of this mean? Like when you put these things out into the market, you can't literally just go with what you started the year.
Yeah.
Yes, we're talking about agile mindset and all that kind of stuff, but the key thing is, how do you incorporate this? Instead of being a reactive person, reactive marketer, how are you set for success to align with the business goals here?
Yeah.
How do you continue to build a practice using the marketing skills and strategy that you started with?
Yeah. And I mean, that sums up the premise, right, for this episode. And I want to get into it, but before we do, I mean, on your first point there, the dynamism in the market right now is really interesting to me as well, because yes, you're right, there's talk of recession, or technically there are recessions that are, depending on where you sit in the world, maybe stagflation, maybe not, blah blah blah. So there's a looming crisis expected by lots of people. At the same time, in at least the markets I look into, many consulting firms seem to have the bestest years ever, market red hot, which, to your point, also triggers lots of M&A going on. So it's actually sort of not clear, or even less clear than it typically is, where it's headed, right? So yeah, I agree with your thinking here. It's a good point in time to discuss changing strategy or changing course mid-flight, mid-trip, whatever. How do you want to kick it off? To take us into it.
Well, okay, let's start with the fact that we basically said, if you need to deal with change, you need to be agile. You need to start getting into these things. You can't have a set in stone, fixed marketing strategy when your business has changed.
Yeah.
So how do you start looking at all the change factors that's come in? Where do you bring in something new? Where do you keep something old? How do you prepare yourself to deal with this? You should, like we were saying earlier, you shouldn't be reactive. You need to account for that there will be change. Yes, there will be other things that you will need to react to, like you might need to change messaging, position. We'll get into all of that, but the key thing here is be prepared. The whole scout motto.
Yeah. So good advice for people who find themselves in a situation where they're surprised by some change. Tip 1, don't be in a situation where you're surprised. Sorry. I think I can't remember the title of the episode, but you and I talked about how you executing your marketing strategy or planning your marketing in the day-to-day tactically actually should be a cadence of meetings, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think we have this episode. I'll link back to it in the show note. But I think what you're saying is the same idea. Just think of a system where you don't do a year plan for marketing and then that's it. Now you go and execute. But instead, like we talked in the previous episode, maybe set up cadence of meetings that effectively allows you to constantly monitor, right, the health of your marketing strategy plan and then intervene if needed. So quarterly meetings with the practice leads, right?
Yeah.
Monthly alignment meetings with other marketing teams. Weekly kickoff meetings with the team to say, okay, what are we going to do now? Is there a new mission? Is there a new job change? Whatever it is, right? These type of things, right? That is what you're referring to by when you say be prepared.
Yes, and also bear in mind there are lots of signals coming, especially like, most companies give out their quarterly results and stuff. And when you see that, you'll end up looking at all the key signals. One, what's your retention hiring rate? If you're looking on the employee side, how much is your business growing? What's the new avenues of business that you suddenly start to explore? Who did you acquire? And what is your current focus? Because like if you're looking at the consulting space, a quarter is like a year. You run through all sorts of things within that time. So whatever you set up will change. Now, within Europe, if you guys are in Europe, I'll say, don't listen to this episode now. Listen to this in September or in even as late as December. Mostly because you guys are going on holiday, so you're just keeping the machine running and that's it. But for a lot of the others, guess what? This is a time when you're suddenly like finding people just purchasing stuff. I mean, this morning I came across another acquisition in the news. Multiple, I mean, not one. I came across like at least 10 acquisitions this morning.
Yeah.
So, and it's like, right.
But good on you for checking, because that is what I wanted to point out. You just said something there, which is there's lots of early signals, right, for these changes. Yeah. But I have been in a place where those existed and I got surprised because I did not have a format where I got to ask about these types of things going on, and found myself in a process that is like the business comes to you and says, oh, look, here's the new service offering we've done. We even created some preliminary sales presentations and so forth. We just need you to pretty it up, dear marketing team. Worst case scenario, right? And how do you get out of that? Like we just said, make sure you are sitting on the desk of the practice leader at least once per quarter and ask these questions, like what you guys have, what are you cooking up? What else is happening in the business? So
pay attention to
early
signals.
on.
Yeah, pay attention to signals because
that's what I know how you work, so I know what you mean when you say you just found acquisitions, right? You have this conversation, so now you know, so now you can be proactive and prepare, maybe even offer some marketing support early in the process, as opposed to being handed the stuff after the fact. And then it's typically, that's also in that scenario, then it's go time, it's fire drill, right? Those people want the presentation like in 2 weeks or something like that, and that's
by the way,
one wants to be in that spot.
Yeah, I was randomly referring to this WPP acquisition that came in my inbox more than all the acquisitions in the space that I'm in and others. But this is not just one. I see a lot going across everywhere. So the key thing is,
which is another point to take notes of, people have external feelers, right? Industry trade newsletters and stuff exist for a reason. Anyway, sorry, that's I shouldn't be lecturing. But so that was phase one, right? Be prepared, make sure you have structures there.
So now you got the intent signals, you had the meetings. You now need to assess what is this going to affect on your marketing strategy, your marketing plan. How, like, first of all, you look at this in the standard questions. Where do you pivot? How do you pivot? When do you pivot? And when you have these questions answered, then you can preempt, the leader, saying that I see these signals, and ask them, does this mean anything? And depending on their answer is when you have to do. If they say no, it's fine, just continue on. They're like, okay, fine, I'll continue on. But if you find any cause for concern, that's the time you need to start the conversation. By the way, this happens.
Which I'm not disagreeing, but I would advise, maybe even if they tell you, no, it's fine, right? We are onboarding a new partnership, or we're entering the market in France or whatever. It's fine, just keep going. You should probably question their assessment, maybe do your own analysis and figure out that actually maybe translating a few web pages to French is something that will be like, I don't know, but you be the professional judge on that. Yeah. But I think to your point on that is exactly right to say, where do we have to pivot and how and when? And I think that my advice would be the most important stuff to immediately review with the does this still work
Yes.
perspective or through that lens are the actual strategic basics, which to me are we still addressing the same target audience and the still pain points within that audience? Is that still the same?
Yeah.
Or will that change? I mean, a recession, if your firm runs into that, is the typical situation where, oh yeah, target audience might be the same, but you better believe their priorities have changed, right? Because now it's all about cash conservation, cutting costs, whatnot. So look, does that change? The offerings, this is something the business has to decide, of course, but maybe you can advise on how it's packaged up. Do the services we put an emphasis on still make sense? Classical example, if you're a very large firm offering lots of stuff, if you have efficiency offerings on the shelf and innovation growth, other types of stuff, maybe in a recession, the efficiency stuff is in higher demand and some more marketing budget should be shifted in that direction than otherwise. I'm making up these examples, but these are typical things.
And I
right?
did want to add something, because you already have it in the notes, the fact that the messaging can change. And it's not just that the overall messaging change, it's more about where does the messaging change and does it need to change. For instance, if you're adding if you're adding a service to a product primarily based offering, you need to know what changes. And it might not even be like an entire change of your messaging and position. It could just be adding a sentence, could be something like that. But you are in that position to make that decision by consulting with your business leaders, not just the practice lead, but the business leaders, because sometimes the practice lead has got the overarching vision, but their strategy person might be the one who gives you this key info.
Yeah. And so once you determine sort of these areas of, I don't know, risk or change needed, but it's good to then go back to the business again and get clarity how they think the game will change and the priorities will change. To your point with the product and service example, I don't know who runs into those, but it's a difference to say, oh, just have some messaging ready that we now also package our expertise in this and that product and people can have it. That's one outcome. The other could be, no, we would actually like to reposition the entire practice, and it's primarily the product and our service component becomes an add-on to make sure customers or clients are successful with the product. There's a wide variety in which this could go. And again, like we so often talk about this in this show, but it's very good to make sure you have the clarity and or even facilitate the business leadership to get to that clarity, because it often doesn't exist or might not exist yet. And marketing coming in and asking quote unquote stupid questions actually can help with that. So it's actually, you're rendering a service by forcing the people to get really clear on what they want, right?
Yes.
And then I think we have a third point, which, yeah.
I was literally going to talk about the same thing, that, you've got all of this and you got to prioritize the order and the focus. Which
that's the third point. Once you have understood, right, where the weak points in the current setup are, or in your strategy or on your collateral, or which websites need to change, prioritize that stuff, because our guess is if you're not working for limitless resources and friends company, that you can't do all the things at once. So you have to sort of, triage it or stagger it, and again, be clear to the business about can't do this quarter. That's like not going to happen. We will focus on it. Don't make the decision with your team internally and leave it at that, but be very clear about the process.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Third part. So we were prepared. The changes hit. We determined what we got to do and prioritize it. What's the next one?
Now you got to look at your stuff. You got to revise all your key basic things that run your strategy, as you were saying earlier, Flo. Like, you got to look at the positioning, you got to look at the messaging, you got to look at what's there, what needs to be changed, and you don't need to change the entire thing. Don't throw the baby with the bathwater kind of thing. You have to look at what needs changing. Yeah. Yes, I know you mentioned earlier that sometimes there's a complete overhaul, but that happens only at the discretion of the practice lead, and that's a huge process, because now you have to convey things to the market, things to your existing clients, and things to your internal teams. So that's a huge exercise. That's not what usually happens. That does happen, but what usually happens is you probably need to change your messaging to the client first, then you need to change the messaging to the market, because guess what? You're dealing with the client regularly. So they will need to know what you're doing.
Yeah. One side comment regarding the complete overhaul, I fully agree. That's best avoided. Like the more elegant, more effective way is typically to evolve what's there, as
Yes.
opposed to complete redo it. If, however, you, for example, work for certain big four companies who are considering, allegedly are considering splitting off their consulting units or whatnot, well, these might be the types of situations where you got to do a complete overhaul, and then, well, your how do I change course process essentially becomes the same as how do I do a marketing strategy in the first place process, right? Because that's just where you are in that case. But yeah,
and that's an entire change management exercise.
Yeah,
because that's a different thing. Yeah.
Which, by the way, that was the one lame advice we had for people in your situation, and well, congrats if you have the challenge, because it's probably a super awesome project to work in. But make sure you have the resources and the time and also the patience set in correctly, because that's going to be obviously a lot of work, and it will need time to be effective, because you are essentially repositioning. In this particular case, we're talking about audit firm splitting of consulting units. You're repositioning not one but two firms. So, again, congrats to you. Impressive project, lots of work. Make sure you're resourced appropriately and manage expectations. That's the best we could come up with for that one. One side note, sorry if I may, because we touched upon the repositioning thing. I just said that I will leave a book recommendation, and I'll also drop it in the show notes. I don't want to go into all of it, but there's actually a book out which I thought was interesting about this particular topic of not positioning but repositioning, which we just mentioned. It's been written by two gentlemen named Leo Hopf and William Welter. The book is called Rethink, Reinvent, Reposition: 12 Strategies to Renew Your Business and Boost Your Bottom Line. Well, that's an American title. Sorry for that dig. I thought it was interesting because I don't know, but I would guess both gentlemen are consultants. It's very frameworky and very hands-on and practical. It gives you lots of if this, then try that types of decision matrices. And yeah, I just think it's as a handy book. You can probably skim through it in one sitting and then go back and back again based on your situation to pick out some best practices. So that's a non-sponsored, by the way, to be clear about this. We're still not shilling or selling anything. I'm recommending because I liked it. So there's that. We have it. Sorry. Yeah. On to the last point, right?
Yeah, actually, I do want to add a third thing to the last point. Like you've got it that it's commit and execute. And then you got to say commit, execute, and revise what you're thinking for the next year. And of course...
True.
And of course, then, yeah, I know, Flo, you are our positioning and messaging guy. So I'll let you talk about how you do that.
Yeah, well, so I mean, commit and execute. The point here is once you have your plan and you have your suggestions together and you're ready to release whatever you've created anew, make sure you do your homework, and again go back to our stakeholder episodes and other stuff to get the buy-in and get it done. That's what I mean by commitment. It's not just you and the marketing team committing to it. Exactly. You have to build the commitment inside the firm that it actually gets executed. Otherwise it's all in vain. And these things have to be done diligently, but they have to be done. That's the main point. And I think Ash has said this previously. It's just the fact that if, for example, if the world changes, usually your message has to change too. If your clients go from boom market into recession, you can't keep talking to them about the same. Like no one's interested in your metaverse webinar next week if their business is burning to the ground. Like, do you know what I mean? These types of things. Yeah. So you have to be reasonably quick in preparing this, and then you got to say, okay, now let's go and commit to it, get it done in maybe an ambitious time frame. Which I think that brings us back to the first point. That's why the being prepared part is so important, because that reduces the stress on the timeline towards the end. The stress will be there still, and it's there for a reason. You gotta roll this new stuff out because you're not going to catch the new headwind, tailwind, whatever. I don't get the wind metaphors in English. Sorry.
And bear in mind that everything that you're doing is taking you through the end of the year, by which time you need to still think about how this goes into your marketing strategy next year. Because what you do might end up being a spin-off, might end up being actually a new sub-offering. So you might need to expand your team, or you might need to think about it. It's not like what you do right now is not like I don't want to say this as like it's a patch until the next thing. This is the pathway to your next year strategy. That's how I would say. This is that roadmap that you build in to focus on like what you would be doing next year, because it's a continuous evolution to get to, as companies love saying, business as usual.
Yeah. And to sort of leave you guys to it and sort of let you have your happy weekend eventually, or happy Friday. On that note, just Ash, I think reading a couple of the 12 strategies from the book, because what you just said, right, what you end up doing might be a spin-off, might be a rebranding, whatever. So just some glimpses on those strategies. He says there's 12, they have funny names, and they're called like, you might end up catching the new wave, putting old wine in new bottles, declare victory and move on, which that's probably a divestment strategy, I don't know. Or aim higher or lower. I think that's a strategy in terms of market and has to do with pricing. So it might go in a variety of directions. So it's important to set a direction, chart the new course, as the title of this episode is, commit, execute, and then you have your structure hopefully in place to revise that as you go. And that should bring you to the end of this year. Okay, that was good, I think, Ash.
Thanks for listening.
I hope that was
everyone.
a relevant topic for people, but I enjoyed discussing it. So,
if
you don't have anything to add, I would.
No, I want to thank the listeners for listening. and I will let you know that Flo and I are still working on our live webinar, so more to come in that space.
Yeah. It's probably going to be after the European summer break, though, because,
Yes.
Anyways, that was good. So thanks a lot, and speak soon. I'm going to stop the recording right here.
Thanks for listening to Unbillable Hours. If you want more, tune in next week. You know where to find us.